Hey everyone, bundle up because we're diving deep into a real horror classic. We're headed to Antarctica, but there's no vacation. We're talking about John Carpenter's The Thing. You know the one I mean, where the paranoia is just as contagious as that alien creature.
You know what's really fascinating about The Thing? It's more than your average jump scares and gore. It gets under your skin. It's like it taps into a primal fear, not just about what's out there in the dark, but what could be right beside us, disguised as something we know.
So you're saying it's not just another monster movie?
Oh, definitely not. Think of it as a slow burn thriller disguised as a horror film. We're going to explore where it came from and break down those unforgettable scenes and try to figure out why The Thing still chills us to the bone all these years later.
Okay, you've definitely got me hooked. We've got an excerpt from a bigger analysis of the film, and we're going to pull out the best parts for you guys. Let's set the scene. 1982. John Carpenter, the horror master himself, directs this film. I know you might be thinking, haven't I seen this before?
Well, you see, Carpenter's The Thing is a remake. It's based on a novella from way back in 1938 called Who Goes There? There was an earlier adaptation in 51, The Thing from Another World, but Carpenter wanted to make something darker, more psychological. He wanted to stay true to the original story.
And what I find so interesting is that Carpenter was a huge fan of that 1951 film. So it wasn't like he was just trying to make a quick buck. He really loved the story, and he saw a chance to create something truly terrifying.
His version really embraces that bleak, isolated beauty of Antarctica. He uses it to build up the tension. Imagine being trapped in this frozen wasteland. You've got the elements to deal with, and then this unseen enemy that could be anyone, anywhere.
Talk about feeling trapped. So for those who haven't seen it, and seriously add it to your watch list, like right now, let's do a quick plot summary. We've got this group of researchers at their isolated Antarctic station, and while things take a turn for the, let's just say, bizarre.
The opening scene, it's brilliant. It sets the whole tone of the film. There's this seemingly normal dog being chased across the ice by a Norwegian helicopter. Pretty simple, right? But it tells us right away something's wrong. Really wrong. Nothing is what it seems.
And we can't forget about the creature itself. We get a glimpse of what's to come in that dog transformation scene. The spider head, the snapping jaws. It's pure nightmare fuel. Rob Bottin, the special effects genius, really pushed the limits back then.
Then the researchers find the remains of the Norwegian camp. It's gruesome. It foreshadows what that alien can do. This thing can perfectly imitate any organism it infects. You can't even tell it's there until it's too late.
So how do you fight something you can't even see?
That's the thing. It feeds on our deepest fears of the unknown. The unseen makes us question everything we see, everyone around us.
And that's where the paranoia starts to take over, right? The researchers are trying to figure out who's infected, and they have to turn on each other.
Yeah.
Every little thing becomes suspicious. A cough, a glance could mean someone's not who they seem.
One of the most iconic scenes that shows this paranoia is the blood test. It's such a simple test, but Carpenter turns it into this pressure cooker of suspense. The way he focuses on their faces, their anxiety is just bubbling under the surface.
You're holding your breath with them, waiting for the result, and then bam, that explosion, that transformation. It's pure horror movie magic.
And even after that shock wears off, you're left with this unsettling feeling. Did they get all of it? Is anyone really safe?
Which leads us to the ending, that ambiguous ending, the one that sparked endless debates among fans. McReady and Childs, the only ones left, are sitting there in the freezing darkness, just looking at each other, suspicious. It's chilling because even after everything they've been through, they can't be sure if they're really safe.
Carpenter doesn't make it easy for us. He leaves us with that same chilling uncertainty. And that's what makes The Thing so good. It stays with you long after it's over. It makes you question what you see, even in the familiar world outside the theater.
So we've got the setting, the alien, the paranoia, all cranked up to 11. The thing, it's more than just scares and effects. It's a film that deals with some big ideas. Trust identity, what it means to be human.
You got it. It's about the choices we make when we're pushed to the edge, when everything familiar becomes terrifying and the line between friend and enemy completely disappears.
So before we dive even deeper into the themes of The Thing, let's take a minute to appreciate how Carpenter uses visuals and sound to create this terror. Ready to peel back those layers?
Let's do it. Carpenter was a master at using visuals to make you feel uneasy and scared. Like the way he frames shots, he often uses wide angles and deep focus to show how vast and empty Antarctica is.
It's like the characters are always tiny compared to their surroundings,
Oh,
totally vulnerable.
Exactly. And then there's the lighting. Dean Cundy, the cinematographer, he uses lots of harsh contrasts and shadows. It creates this claustrophobic feeling even when they're in wide open spaces.
It's like the darkness is another character, closing in on them, hiding the threat. You never know what's hiding, just out of sight.
And speaking of hiding, we can't forget those amazing special effects, Rob Bottin's work on this film. It was groundbreaking. Those transformations are still some of the most disturbing and raw things ever put on film.
Pure nightmare fuel. The way the thing just contorts and shifts and changes from one horrifying form to another. It's like evolution on fast forward, but absolutely terrifying.
And you know what makes those effects so effective? They were all practical. They used puppets, animatronics makeup.
No CGI.
None at all.
Yeah.
It's all real tangible. It has a visceral quality that you just don't get with computer-generated effects. You can practically feel the slime and the sinew.
Which brings us to the themes of the film, because as terrifying as the creature is what really gets under your skin with Tachi, the thing is how it uses that creature to explore some very human anxieties.
Oh, absolutely. The film becomes this study of paranoia and how trust just crumbles. These researchers, they depended on each other to survive, and now they have to question every interaction, every little gesture, every word.
Because anyone could be the...
Exactly. The film taps into that primal fear, not knowing who to trust, being surrounded by potential enemies who look like your friends. It's a fear that's just as relevant today as it was back then.
Makes you think about your own relationships, your own circle of trust. How well do you really know the people around you? What would it take for you to start questioning them, their motives, who they really are?
And the film doesn't shy away from showing us the dark side of that paranoia. We see how fast suspicion turns into violence, how the need to survive can just override basic morals.
Like that scene where they start using the blood test to find the infected? It's a desperate move, and it leads to some really brutal moments.
The blood test scene is interesting because it shows how the thing forces us to confront our own prejudices and assumptions. We judge people based on the tiniest difference, the slightest thing that seems off from what we consider normal.
It's a powerful statement about how fear and uncertainty can mess with our perceptions and make us act irrationally.
And it's not just about trusting other people. The film also explores the fear of losing yourself. If anyone can be the thing perfectly copying how you look, how you act, even your memories, what does it even mean to be human?
An existential crisis in a horror movie.
Exactly. The thing represents our own worries about who we are and what's real. How can we be sure of ourselves or even the people around us when identity itself becomes so fluid and unstable?
It's like the film's asking what's left when you take away all the external stuff about identity. What's at the core? What makes us us?
And then there's the theme of survival, which runs through the whole film. These characters, they're not just fighting for their own lives, they're fighting for humanity.
Because if even one of those things escapes from the base, it's game over for the rest of us.
Right. The stakes are huge, and the characters are always having to make tough choices, weighing their own survival against the risk of letting this alien loose on the world.
And those choices often come down to sacrifice. Who are they willing to risk, and who are they willing to lose to protect everyone else?
It's a real credit to Carpenter's filmmaking, that he can weave these complex themes into such a thrilling and entertaining film. It's a horror movie that makes you think, that stays with you.
You're left with this uneasy feeling, this awareness that there's darkness just under the surface.
It's like the film infects you with its own paranoia, its own sense of dread.
Okay, so we've got the creature, the paranoia, the existential dread. But what about the film's legacy? How did people react when it first came out, and how has its reputation changed over time?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. When the thing came out in '82, it actually got mixed reviews and didn't do so well at the box office. Some critics thought it was too bleak, too hopeless.
Seriously. But it's considered a classic now.
I know, right? Hard to believe. But back then, it was kind of overshadowed by other big movies like E.T. and Blade Runner. Audiences weren't ready for that intense paranoia and ambiguity.
So what happened? How did it go from a flop to a cult classic?
Well, thanks to home video and the rise of cult films, the thing slowly gained a new following, people who loved its darkness and its unsettling questions. They began to see its complexity, how deep it was, how brilliantly it was made.
It's like it needed time to breathe, to age like a fine wine before people could really appreciate it.
Exactly. And now it's seen as one of the best horror films ever made. It's inspired so many filmmakers and sparked so many debates and analyses.
It's amazing how a film that was basically dismissed can become so important.
It shows that sometimes the most challenging and thought-provoking art just needs a little time to find its audience.
Okay, we've talked about the themes, the effects, the legacy, but we can't finish this deep dive without talking about that ending.
Yes. The ending that launched 1,000 fan theories. McReady and Childs sitting in the ruins of the base, each one suspicious of the other, not sure if they're really safe.
The perfect ending for a film all about paranoia and uncertainty.
And what's so brilliant is there's no right answer. Carpenter leaves it open for us to decide. We have to come to our own conclusions based on the little clues throughout the film.
Like Childs not having any visible breath in that last scene, which makes a lot of fans think he's the thing.
Or how McCready gives Childs a drink that looks a lot like a Molotov cocktail. Almost like he's already decided about Childs.
It's all in the details, those hints and ambiguities that keep you thinking long after the movie's over.
And it shows how powerful the film is that we're still talking about the ending after all this time.
What do you think? Who's the thing? McCready, Childs, or maybe both?
That's up to you. The beauty of the thing is in its ambiguity. There's no right answer. It's about the journey exploring those unsettling questions and the realization that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we can't see.
We've explored the creature, the characters, the themes, that infamous ending, but the thing hasn't just stayed frozen in time. Its influence has spread, it's reached into our culture. Ready to see how it's still impacting us today.
Let's take a look.
Okay, so we know the thing is way more than some creature feature. It really gets in your head, makes you question everything. But it goes beyond just giving you the creeps. We're talking about a film that's become like a cultural icon, you know, influencing movies, TV shows, video games, even comic books.
It's amazing how the thing crosses all those lines. Its influence, you can see it in the tense scenes in Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight, the creature design and body horror in The Shape of Water from Guillermo del Toro, even those paranoia-driven video games like Dead Space.
So it's like the thing has become this guidebook for creators who want to explore like darker parts of human nature.
Exactly. It's a source of inspiration for anyone who wants to tap into those fears, isolation, not being able to trust anyone, the collapse of society.
Yeah.
And it goes further than horror and sci-fi. You can see bits of it in thrillers, political dramas, even social commentary.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you think about it, the themes in the thing feel even more relevant now than they did back in the 80s. We live in a world where fake news spreads so fast, trust is disappearing, and it seems like everyone's suspicious of everyone else.
Yeah, it's almost like it predicted the future. The thing reminds us how easily fear and not knowing what's true can turn us against each other. It's like a warning, about how fragile our connections are and how dangerous it is to give in to paranoia and division.
It's like the film is holding a mirror up to us, making us face those uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
And that's why I think the thing still hits home with people today. It's not just a scary movie. It makes you think, it challenges what you believe, and it definitely leaves you with more questions than answers.
Which is what a good deep dive is all about, right?
Totally. It's about those moments where you're like, oh, wow. Encouraging people to think critically and giving them something to think about long after the conversation's over.
So as we wrap up our look at the thing, what are some of the key things you hope people will take away from this?
Well, first, I hope they get a better understanding of how artistic the film is. The way Carpenter uses visual sound and the story itself to create a really immersive and scary experience.
And I hope they see that the thing is more than just a monster movie. It digs into our deepest fears and anxieties about what we don't know, about who we are, about how easily trust can be broken.
It forces us to look at the monster inside all of us, to see that darkness exists not just out there in the world, but also within each of us.
So before we go, we want to leave you with this one last thought. Imagine you're in that Antarctic base, freezing cold, and the threat of the thing is always there. Who would you trust? How far would you go to stay alive? And what would it take for you to face that monster inside yourself?
The answers might be scarier than you think, because the thing shows us that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we don't see, the ones hiding right there in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to show us who they really are.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the thing. Next time you're feeling a little too safe, a little too comfortable, just ask yourself, what if?